Morning. We are here today for Tech Tuesday interviewing Mrs. Erin Farley, who made an amazing podcast project for her students in collaboration with Susie Cooper and Mrs. Woodmansey. And we're actually kind of doing our own live podcast right now. Mrs. Farley, tell me a little bit about what you did for your project.
Well, it was just an idea built up for a long time of just because I like podcasts, and Susie and Susan helped bring it to volition, and the kids worked in groups and researched kind of interesting topics so they could deep dive the Revolutionary War. And they had to research, they had to learn GarageBand, they had to record the tracks, put in theme music, fade out, add special effects, and also show they were an expert on their topic.
Did you find the tech easy to navigate through, or do you think the kids picked it up pretty easily?
Well, I think it was a little tricky, but it worked out that I refer to her as the Apple Lady. The Apple Lady was on campus, and I gave up like two class periods, and she came and taught all my students how to do GarageBand. And so that was very fortuitous, because I think it would have been a lot trickier. And I typed all of her notes, and she made screenshots, and then I added that to a podcast folder. I had in Google Drive as a resource. So I think that helped. I think any tech project that's like brand new, you've never done before, you got to build in a lot of flexibility. So like I ended up extending the due date because I think it took longer for the editing. I had to figure out how to turn it in. I had to figure that out. And so I emailed with her a while back, and we made a Google folder, and they were able to drop it in there. But even stuff like sharing tracks with each other, they're working in a group. One of my students had to figure that out, and then we kind of like shared. So it's kind of like we combined all of our brains with students and mine to figure out how to do stuff.
How do you feel the engagement was with the students compared to projects maybe that were similar or this topic in the past? Did they like it?
I think so. I mean, they're turning it in today, so I will know more. I'd like to get some feedback with them now that it's done. But I think they had fun. I did one work day a week, so they did a total of I think 4 or 5 work days over a month, so they had a month to do it. And they definitely jumped right in. They were working hard. And
were you surprised by the depth of some of their responses, like twists? I think you mentioned a smallpox twist. Do you think you would have gotten that in a regular project?
Well, I think it allowed for a lot of creativity. So, one of the topics was the smallpox epidemic during the Revolutionary War, and so one of my students' mom was a doctor, so they wanted to interview her and include her in the podcast. A lot of kids put like sponsors and commercials. I have one podcast I'm excited to hear. They decided to do kind of like an old school radio drama because they chose some spies, revolutionary spies, and so they actually are acting out with like sound effects and music, and so I'm kind of excited to hear how that turns out. And we did have to spend some time teaching what podcasts were first. So they had to learn about all the different kinds of podcasts. They had to listen to some current podcasts, see what they liked, what they didn't like about it, what made it engaging, what made it boring, and so they could maybe be inspired to do their own. So I think they seemed engaged. I'm real curious to hear now that it's turned in. I think there was some issues with groups, per usual, when you have group work, but it was cooler than just making posters, which I did last year.
Great. Well, thank you so much for trying something new and putting yourself out there in technology, and we can't wait to see the results. Thanks. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday Tip. I'm interviewing Mrs. Erin Farley, who's done some amazing work with our students, collaborating, I think, with Mrs. Woodmansey as well.
So Mrs. Cooper.
And Mrs. Cooper on